And welcome back. We have with us on set this morning Lisa Shoman, Senior Counsel and former Foreign Minister, who is going to walk us through some of the very important points as it relates to re-registration, eligibility requirements in respect to voting, and the ICJ. Good morning, Lisa. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good, but I'm almost rather wish I could just stand back and let the Garifuna Collective take over one time, because I'm so excited that they're in the house. So I'm really, truly honored to go first and then have the opportunity to listen.
Then you can enjoy the good music after.
Yes.
All right, this is an opportunity, of course. We know that you are very vocal on national issues in this country, and we appreciate that because you do bring your own experience and your legal knowledge to the conversation. So I want to start off, one of the most pressing topic at this time is looking at the re-registration process.
Yes.
And there are a number of issues that have been persistent that we have been trying to get answers to, and they seem very different. So let's start with that. We're looking at the eligibility specifically of the diaspora. We know we have quite a number of people who view outside of Belize, so they'll appreciate this one. And we've heard the Chief Elections Officer say very clearly that even if you're a Belizean living abroad, you must be residing in Belize for 2 months to be eligible for re-registration. Then we heard our foreign minister say something where he agrees with what is being said, but perhaps that will be something that's not as important. That won't be looked at. Let me get your insight on that one.
Yes. First of all, it is hard sometimes to get lay people to understand that laws are things that have their own language. What I mean by that, the law says you must be resident in Belize. It doesn't say you must have resided here for 2 months. Resident is a term of art. In some legislation, it says ordinarily resident. I would argue they mean one and the same thing. Okay? What does that mean? It means that this is your domicile. This is the way you live. So you know them people who put up on Facebook, I live in Orlando, Florida? Correct. Then can come here for 2 months and register. You do not live here. This is not your place of residence. You are not a resident of Belize. If you are living somewhere else, if your principal place of abode is elsewhere, whether it be Orlando, Florida, whether it be Nice, France, you are not resident in Belize. And until the law changes, and it makes no sense to get annoyed with me, I didn't write the law, or people like me who point it out, for instance, the Chief Elections Officer, that this is the law, and until such time as that law changes, persons who are not residents of Belize cannot register to vote. Or rather, if you do, the consequences are that there will be an investigation and they will find out. Because I will tell you this, Marlene, I registered, I think it was July 3rd. Today is what, the 18th, right? Sunday, investigators came to my house. As it happened, I was home because I was about to start watching the World Cup. No, they came just after. Thank goodness, because maybe I know me I paid no mind. I was too excited. Yeah, they came at about, I think, 11:30 to check to see if that was my place of residence. And I had to fill out a form and sign it to say this is where I live. You know why, Marlene? Because if I have committed a fraud by telling people this is where I live and I don't live there, I'm on the hook for an electoral offense.
Did you have to present any information?
No, they kind of took me at my word that that was my house because I was coming out the door and the dogs clearly knew who I was. But yeah, no, I had to fill a form to say this is my house. I own the house. I don't rent it. I own it, right? And sign that this is where I reside. This is my place of residence.
Those are the legal, that's a legal explanation on it. But I want to get your opinion here in whether or not perhaps this is something that needs to be changed.
I don't know that it needs to be changed without having a national conversation on whether we should change it. What I'm saying is, my opinion on that is just my opinion. There are, I believe, 100 and something thousand Belizeans who are registered to vote. All of those Belizeans should have the say as to whether people who do not reside in Belize, who are not ordinarily resident in Belize, should be registered as voters and under what conditions. Because remember now, we got a cute system, okay? The system says that you are represented by someone who runs in your area, who offers themselves as the area representative. If you don't live here and you live in Orlando, Florida, or Nice, France, who represents you? Is it just a matter of going back to where your granny may live, your mommy may live? You used to live 30 years ago. Maybe that address doesn't even exist anymore. So where do you register? There are a lot of people who suggest that one way around this, so that diasporans are not completely disenfranchised, is to think outside the box and perhaps provide a diaspora representative who sits in the Senate, just like you have a representative of the unions, the churches, and that person would represent all diasporans and have a say in the governing of our nation.
Does that exist anywhere else in the world?
I think it does, Kevin, but you've called me on it, and so now I'm going to have to do the research. I'm sure that wasn't pulled out of thin air. But then again, we are one of these unique systems that have a unique Senate. And I think it would not do violence to the idea that our Senate is inclusive for a reason. We want to have as many diverse voices as possible. And I am certainly one who believes that if the churches, for instance, have a say, and they don't pay taxes, I see no reason why diasporans shouldn't have a representative. I can tell you that the District of Columbia in the United States has a representative, Eleanor Holmes Norton, that is actually a member of Congress, but she has a voice and no vote. So the license plates in DC read taxation without representation, because the District of Columbia is a special case, okay? So I think that would probably be the closest parallel that I know of to that. But, you know, that's something we all have to talk about, man. I don't think that it is for any political party to just impose that upon people just like that.
To shift from what the law currently states.
Correct. Yeah. Without having that conversation, I think we have to have it. Yeah. I'm not saying, some people go so far as to say we should have a referendum on that. I think it's enough to have the consultation, just like we would do a consultation for constitutional changes. That is important because then it allows for diversity of views. And I would not be averse to any diaspora group or persons speaking as loudly as they like in those national conversations. It will affect them too. Yeah.
Now, I want to go back.
Sure.
Maybe I'm worried about where we are right now as a country.
Right. We should all be, by the way.
But I'd like you to go back, if you can, and tell us, why are we having re-registration now?
Yes.
Why has it taken so long?
Okay.
And a little bit of the history on it. Why are we here?
I can actually answer this for you. If you recall, we went through a re-registration exercise in 1997. That was done, and the law is that those rules, this exercise should take place every 10 years, believe it or not. That's the law. We haven't changed it. However, it can be postponed. And so I'm here to tell you that in 2007, when I was sitting around the cabinet table, the thinking at the time was that the 2007 elections were almost upon us. So that for us to have gone to an electoral re-registration process just months before an election, I think would have thrown people into a bit of a tizzy. As it was, I can say that politically, the PUP, for instance, used the 1997 exercise to relaunch themselves, to have that vigor, to have that activity. There isn't a law that says so, but we probably should put in place a safeguard that says whenever an election is 6 months away, you have to postpone it until that's over. Re-registration is a fairly expensive exercise, and people have a lot of angst about it. If, for instance, the Prime Minister were to call a snap election now, for instance, what would occur? Well, I would argue that everybody who was on the electoral rolls before the 1st of July would have to be permitted to vote. There would be no other role for you to use to have a franchise at this point, right? Otherwise, what would you do? It's only the people who are so far re-registered. And let me tell you, I've re-registered on the 3rd of July. The investigators just came to my house on Sunday. I'm not even on a list yet. I will now go on a list. And anybody who wants to can challenge me, I believe, once that list is published for the next 10 days, right? And then I become an elector, they give me my card, blah, blah, blah. So if it's called now, what has to happen is you have to revert to the old list, clearly. Clearly. So I'm saying that to say that for all of those people who are anxious as to why it is being done, it was postponed in 2007, and then when the issue came up again, it was postponed yet again, okay?
But
so
it is
we are
an important exercise to be held.
We are now, because remember, it should have been held then in 2017. It wasn't done, it's being done now.
Yes.
And it has to be done now because our government went ahead and committed to a date for this referendum. And had also committed to the people of Belize that this list would be revised prior to any such referendum. I believe redistricting was also promised, but I just don't see how that can be done before a March referendum date. I could be wrong, but I don't see how.
But the re-registration process is an important exercise.
Absolutely. And there is continuous registration going on. People who have died are taken off the list, blah, blah, blah. But that's not the point. The point is that this is what our system calls for. A reset of the button every 10 years. Well, maybe that's too much. Maybe it should be every 15 years or every 20 years, but that's not the point. This is the law.
But if we look at the amount of movement that takes place on an election day, it clearly shows that people were not registered in the areas that they needed to be, that they currently reside. And if we looked at the influx of people who are flown in to participate in the election process, it shows that the diaspora is already, has had a voice in our voting process.
Right.
I wanna
so for the foreign minister to suggest that it's okay for those people to register because nobody's going to check, folks in the diaspora, I have news for you, then go check. Then come to my house. Maybe they're not going to check you, but then come to my house. Come check. And so if you do not reside in Belize, you really have no business under this current law registering again to vote. Because you do not qualify legally. Now, I know we don't like hear about lot of Belize. I know we want to try find a way around it and all of that. But that's the law.
Yes, you're discounting political might.
I'm a lawyer, Kevin. I have to do that. No, I mean, let's get serious about this.
But that's why there is the public. You can appeal to.
I hear you.
You can challenge,
Of course you can challenge it. And I'll tell you, this is nothing new. I will clearly remember that just before the 98 elections, one Ramon Witz, who was then the head of the SIS, tried to register himself in his mother's house in San Ignacio, and I challenged him and got him off the list. Fortunately, his baby mother was willing to come because she lived 3 doors down, and he said, he don't live there. I know where he live, that they know he live. So we were able to get him off because not only did he not live at his mother's residence, his home was not even in that constituency. Is that a big deal, really, if you reside in another home within the constituency? The issue is when you don't even reside in the constituency and your place of residence is Nice, France, or Orlando, Florida. And trust me, everybody could go screenshot your Facebook for say where you live and use it as evidence in a court. It's called electronic evidence, and there's an entire act which permits for you to introduce these things into evidence.
I wanted to make a note because, you know, sometimes I think we take for granted that people are in full understanding of processes.
Right.
And one of the conversations I had recently was that one person told me they weren't going to re-register because they don't want to participate in the referendum. And sometimes I think linking the re-registration to the purpose of participating in the referendum may lead one to believe that it is only for that purpose.
Well, it's kind of been sold like that, almost in a way. Why do I say that? Because the spur for having the exercise now appears to be the referendum that has to be held in March. However, I would say to that person that you can't even vote for village council chairman if you're not registered.
You're no longer.
This is a matter of your privilege as a citizen. This is a matter of your franchise, which is why, Marlene, anybody who is going to be stripped of their franchise, whether it be a Guatemalan-born Belizean, or whether it be a diaspora Belizean, or whether it be one a week Rafi will live here with whole life. If you're going to strip somebody of that franchise, you have to go to court and prove that you have no right to be on that role, and you must do so on an individual basis. This notion that you're going to get some declaration to throw a bunch of people off a voters list is flawed. Well, not only flawed, it's false. It is not going to happen. Just like Kevin could tell you, liberty of the citizen, the one of the most sacred tenets of our Constitution. You can't deprive somebody of their liberty just like that. And they have a right for a writ of habeas corpus for go to court for say, show me why you for lock me up. Right? In the same way, if you're going to strip me of my voting rights, I've registered, I've managed to get myself on the list. I've managed to jump through the hoops and satisfy the people them that I should be registered. If you're going to challenge me and knock me off the list, you have to come to court with your witnesses and your proofs. I don't have to prove anything. You have to prove that I should not be on that list. Same with citizenship, because there's a lot of people running around out there thinking there will be some declaration to say that people who come from Guatemala, Honduras, wherever, mostly Guatemala, will be deprived of their citizenship by a declaration. Ain't going to happen.
Well, let's dig deeper into that one, because we did post, and sometimes I feel when we talk about the diaspora issue, this is perhaps the reason that they're most upset, because
well, they conflate the two. They say, how come Guatemalan citizens or former Guatemalan citizens can vote and I can't?
Now, the chief elections officer has said that if a person who was born in Guatemala has Belizean citizenship, comes to register, they have to go through the process. They will go through the process.
Yes, and their only concerns are the following. Do you have the proper documentation? Are you eligible? Meaning you're not under 18 and you actually reside here, right? Then those persons have to be registered by law. Those are the criteria, you see? So to get upset because you don't qualify under the ROPA, the Representation of the People Act, and you point out other citizens who are qualified and then get annoyed about that, forgive me, but to me that is a flaw of logic. But maybe I understand you feel a way about it, but that's not so it work, right? That's the law. And until we change that, that'll be the law.
Now, the issue there is whether or not they have legitimately renounced their Guatemalan citizenship. And this is where it gets a bit murky.
You know, I went to actually go and, first of all, the notion that somehow Guatemalan law has any kind of veto over our law is ludicrous. Because we are a sovereign nation, Marlene. Kevin and any lawyer will tell you, when you are a sovereign nation, the only thing that probably trumps your domestic law is if you voluntarily sign a treaty to change that, right? Enter some convention or treaty. That's not the case with Guatemala. So what Guatemalan law says applies to Guatemalans in Guatemala. What the section actually says is no Guatemalan can be deprived of their citizenship. And it specifically says that that does not mean if you're going through a naturalization process, that therefore hampers the deprivation clause. I want to try broke that down. According to Guatemalan law, no Guatemalan citizen, no person born on Guatemalan soil can be deprived of Guatemalan citizenship except by their own free act when they're making an act of nationalization or naturalization elsewhere. Clear. It's actually clear. But even if that were not so, our law simply says they have to renounce. Okay? So what does that mean? We have to set up whatever rules and regulations around renunciation. And once they have fulfilled that, I would argue that that's it. And all those persons thinking we're going to go to court and challenge this, we'll have to realize that you're going to have to challenge those people one by one. Because citizenship is a personal right.
So what I'm hearing from you is that while this has been a public concern, it's a moot point.
I think it is very much a moot point with the laws the way it stands. I'm arguing it as a lawyer. I'm not arguing it as a layperson. I'm not saying to anybody whether this should be or shouldn't be. I'm talking of almost 30 years experience of being a lawyer. I'm talking about being somebody who has for the past 10 years focused very heavily on constitutional and administrative law, among other things. And my experience tells me that this is the way the courts will go. When we had the Caleb Orozco case, I can now say it because it's not going to affect it. When we had the Caleb Orozco case, I actually used to live in terror that something would happen to Caleb, because if Caleb were no longer with us, someone had killed him, he had passed away, we wouldn't have a case, Marlene. That would be the end of that case, and you have to begin afresh with a new litigant. Now, his rights are a little different because his rights were targeting a specific law, see? But this is what it's going to take to challenge the application of the Constitution to the ROPA, or rather the ROPA, whether they're inconsistent. And that's, or the Citizenship Act, really, not the ROPA, because that's, ROPA is about registration and electors, and this is citizenship, and are two different things. One qualifier for the next, but they're not the same act. So if you're going to challenge that, I still say you have to find one somebody, or a couple of somebodies, and challenge the law.
Lisa?
Tell me.
18%.
Yes.
The last calculation from a very credible source.
Okay.
Was that the registration process in Belize, re-registration process in Belize was at about 18%.
Okay. It's been 16, 17 days.
Yes.
Less, because I don't know, they don't work Sunday. I think they work Saturdays.
But I'm quite tickled by all of these conversations that we're having.
Yes.
But I think we're missing the chicken coop.
The big picture, okay.
And the chicken coop is that locally, there's a disconnect, and I think you guys were starting to talk about it earlier. Is this a rush time? There's so much going on. We have a voting system that needs to be revamped and turned on its head and cleaned. We have elections coming up in the next year. We have the Guatemala issue. We have an education campaign. There's a lack of money. Is this really a wrong? We have communication issues. We have communication issues between our government and our people. Is this just really another really bad time?
Make we look at it this way. 18% is actually not bad for the first 17 days. Let's arguably say that 1/4 of the period of time for re-registration has passed, because it's 2 months, right? July and August. And we've registered 18%. Okay, it's not 25%, but it's not that far off either. Especially bearing in mind that we don't want to set a last minute people.
We're
The rush
procrastinators,
when
yeah.
come at the end. And what is very clear and Belizeans should understand, even if you don't catch it within this 2-month period, you can still go to the Elections and Boundaries Office in your area after August and still re-register. Nothing prevents you from doing that. I think you have, for the sake of argument with the referendum, I think you have up to, make we call it mid-January, to do so. Please, I don't want to procrastinate because the people and they spend a lot of free money for do this special in this time, right? Where people, it's a little slower during these months, people can actually go and take the time.
And they have the schools to use,
I was quite, yes, it's available. I was quite tickled by the fact that it really took me 15 minutes to re-register, and it only took that long because the tablets that they use, when they type in the info, refreshes the page every time they fill a field. And so it's a little clunky because it takes a little time to refresh.
Because it's going directly into their database, I believe.
Well, if it is, it's going wireless because I see it hooked up to anything. One would hope so.
But in terms of messaging,
yes,
it's just...
The messaging hasn't been
claustrophobic
successful.
almost because you have to have messaging for re-registration to explain to people why it's important.
That's happening.
And at the same time, you have to be giving people information about the ICJ and the referendum vote.
This is why people are conflating. No, I wouldn't say I wouldn't say you're right. I think Belizeans are very capable of holding 2, 3, 4, even 10 sophisticated messages together at the same time. I will give them credit for that. I think what happens is politically, the messaging comes across as re-register or you won't be able to vote in the referendum. And that perhaps is the most unfortunate of messages in terms of re-registration, because it should be your right to vote is one of your most sacred rights as a citizen. Don't let this time pass you by. This is important. This is really important, not just because of the referendum, but because it allows you to have a say about the very government that is in place. I won't say taking you to the referendum, but that is running your country.
I also think it's capitalizing on momentum. I think people will be more driven, for those who want to participate in the referendum, they'll be more driven to get out and re-register early or late.
This is the concern. I mean, I think that those people in the diaspora who are driven are certainly motivated by the fact that we are going to a referendum, and it sticks in their craw that persons born in Guatemala who became citizens are able to register to vote, and they are not. It sticks in their craw. Some of those people are actually going to have to pick themselves up, come here and mount a challenge and get a determination. But as I said, I think it would be really difficult to see how any court would say that somehow the laws prejudice them in such a way that their fundamental rights and freedoms are violated. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm saying it's really difficult to see how.
Now, you're a human rights activist, and I think one of the issues we haven't really discussed. And
so is Kevin, by the way.
Yes, I know.
He's the vice president.
I was going to say he'll say for himself
of the Human Rights Commission of Belize.
But we're going to move into the conversation about the referendum. But one of the things when we're talking about the re-registration process, and we monitor, especially as a news station, what people are saying online in our newscasts, on our blogs, and to a certain extent, there's a level of xenophobia that's being built with Belizeans in how we view...
I would argue that we have always had a measure of xenophobia, just that perhaps we were not able to vent it in quite the way that we do now. Obviously, we have the medium. It's the same thing like in the States. When did people start to get so nasty about reporting black people who are going about their lives, reporting Latinos who are going about their lives? And I argue that this probably always happened. It's just that now you could sit in and show themselves. Similarly here, we've always although we say we are a diverse people and we're a melting pot, blah, 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 we still hold on to Willie Prejudice Day. So you've always had this tug against, you know, Crofet versus Panya versus Garifuna versus Maya, who and who better than who. We call people Chinese. We have our biases and prejudices about Mennonites. We have our biases and prejudices about East Indians. We call them Kule. We have our biases and prejudices about what we call Hindu. So we have our biases. We always have. What I see as being particularly disturbing to me is the way in which this is becoming vitriolic, hateful, really hateful, and not just throw a word now. Because what you're saying to persons who are naturalized Belizeans is, you're not as good as I am. We do not have classes of citizens. Your birth gives you the right to be a Belizean. It does not make you a better Belizean than one who acquired it by nationality, descent, or marriage. It really does not. No first class and second class citizen. So for people who say born Belizeans, I say to them, yes, that is an accident of birth. You got lucky.
So your mom went into labor.
You won the birth lottery. Happy for you. Mi banyato. You know, make me and you and Kevin better than, for instance, I'll use a famous example since he put it out there. It doesn't make us better than Julius Espat's wife, who got married to her husband, was naturalized, became a Belizean citizen, has had 2 Belizean children, has lived all of her adult married life here, and is a Belizean. She has the same rights we do. You see?
All right, let's move into our next topic now, and I think this is definitely one we want to give some time to, which is looking at the referendum that is quickly approaching. Yesterday, we heard from the Deputy Prime Minister saying that he does agree that the education campaign needs to be intensified.
Yes, you can't go around telling people they're crazy because they hold an opinion. That is number one.
I suppose that leads us to your comments on the...
I'll cut to the chase. Look, I wrote an open letter to the Prime Minister, which unfortunately got lost in the noise of worrying about whether I was going to be fired or not. My open letter is still very much valid, and I'll republish it. Because, in a sense, what the Foreign Minister says is important to so many people, not just in this country, but it is our, as Kevin would put it, messaging to the world. So you cannot go around discounting the opinions of your own citizens by saying, anybody doesn't want to go to the ICJ, you're crazy. You cannot persuade flies with vinegar. If your hope is to say to people, look, we think, as a government, we think we should go to the ICJ, and these are the reasons why. I think that's as far as you can take it, and I will go further. If you are asking people to help you with funds to conduct this campaign, you are duty-bound to let any credible voice that has an opposing opinion to yours, give them equal time. Give them some time to be able to acquaint Belizeans with what they're saying. If their message is easily rebuttable, rebut it. If it is not credible, Belizeans will reject it. But give them that opportunity, because to do otherwise is undemocratic. Undemocratic. I had asked people for funds too, and saying it's an exercise in democracy. You can't be right by doing wrong.
Now, you have been very vocal in this conversation, and a few months ago we had a conversation here speaking of why you now feel that it's not in the best interest of Belize at this time to vote yes to the referendum.
Thank you for putting it the correct way. And I still believe that the ICJ ultimately is probably the best vehicle for dealing with the issue. My problem was the conditions at the time, and some of them persist. I've been overtaken by the fact that the referendum will be held no matter what I say.
So do you still hold that position?
I do. We don't have a Sarstoon protocol.
So if there is no Sarstoon protocol in place,
isn't it?
if there is no change in how you see the diplomatic relations between Belize and Guatemala, you still feel that voting yes in the referendum come 2019 is a wrong decision for Belizeans?
No. And I would never go that far. I would never dare. Belizeans all have a right to their own opinion on the matter. My opinion is actually irrelevant. People are going to have to make up their own minds about this. My responsibility as a citizen who has been deeply involved with this thing for over 15 years is to point out what I see as the issues. And I can tell you outright, Assad completely disagrees with me that the Sarstoon protocol should be in place before we go to any referendum. He reminds me that if I had been around with my opinions when George Price was going to independence, maybe I may have put stumbling blocks in his way, because at that time there were people saying to him, you cannot go without a defense guarantee. He eventually got the defense guarantee virtually at the 11th hour before we went to independence. Read Assad's book. So Assad and I do not see eye to eye on this. But my thing is this: if you cannot get your counterpart to even agree to go back to what obtained before, the status quo ante, to go back to that situation where we were sharing the Sarstoon, and we were sharing it for the most part amicably until 2015, early 2015. If you can't get them to go back to that, what hope do I have that after we go to the ICJ and the ICJ has pronounced, that they will be faithful to and live up to what the ICJ has pronounced on? That is my fundamental issue with it.
But what you have just stated, I think, actually confirms what many of the critics of this entire process have said.
Sure.
Which is, even if we go to the ICJ and we get the treaty validated and we get everything intact for Belize,
yes,
that we have no guarantee from Guatemala that they will.
So here's the trade-off. Is it better to do nothing at all? And that's the calculus we have to make. How much of that is your fare? Is that a 10% fare? Is it a 50% fare? Is it a 100% fare? You have to decide for your own self where you could live with. I still think it is worth going to the ICJ. However, here's what I don't want, and I will use Palestine and Israel as an example, because I think that's the one that concerns me the most. Go and look at a map just before 1948. Go and look at a map on which there were UN resolutions, and look at what Palestine looked like then, and Israel, and go and look at the map now. And what has happened is that Israel has pushed, especially in the last 15 years, these settlements to a point that Palestine now look like Swiss cheese, neem salami. Strategic holes all over the place. Till now there's more holes than cheese where Palestine used to be. That is my valid concern. That's not hysteria. It is not alarmist. It is real, it is practical, and it makes sense. If you start with the Sarstoon, where the next thing tomorrow? Where are we going tomorrow? Are we going to go there from the Sarstoon to the Tamash? Are we going to go further? That's
so you
my
feel
concern.
that a establishment of a Sarstoon protocol is an act in good faith that leads you to believe that
why would they not do it? Why would they not do it? Nothing stops them from asserting their right to half of Belize, all of the keys. They've done that since 1999 in writing. They have not resiled from that position. All of the keys, you know, except St. George's Key and half of Belize. That's their claim. They're not going to change from that. And when they submit their memoranda to the ICJ, that's what it will say. So making a protocol on the Sarstoon, even if it says this protocol is made without prejudice to whatever our claim will be at the ICJ, but for right now, till the ICJ pronounce, we'll hold it down right here. What's wrong with that?
Because it's going to court. So the court is going to decide
Exactly.
anyway.
So you see where they go?
Well, the opposite argument is why do that? Because the court is going to
decide
decide anyway, so it's just a waste of diplomatic.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't.
I'm just saying what they.
Correct.
But can I?
My rebuttal is that it isn't a matter of that. It's a matter of real politic. What obtains on the ground? If you cannot, with me as an equal partner, we say, okay, we clasp hands, we're going to the ICJ. And the agreement was, because I was in those discussions, the agreement was that nothing that happened during the period of time until we actually got a determination, nothing that happened would affect the outcome.
I want to go back to messaging, though, because we keep on talking past the people, in my opinion.
Okay.
40% of people who are voting will vote on something emotional.
I clearly understand
all of the intellectual chatter that we're hearing, all of the nice things.
Yes, except that, you know, let's not dismiss it because,
I won't dismiss it, but you have to be very realistic.
I'm very real about it. I agree.
Of what we've demoted our democratic system to be.
There we do.
We have, I don't want to use the R word, but we've really...
We've dumbed it down.
We've dumbed it down significantly. Yes. But the problem I want to go back to is messaging. And the time frames that we have. It appears to me, to put it in the most polite, kind, and naive way, that our foreign minister is under pressure. Oh, the only way that your language deteriorates, which, you know, it's an emotional situation, and to me, fuel has been thrown on it, and given people a catchline, a slogan.
You watch the World Cup, Joe?
To it.
You know what that auto goal?
Yes.
Look, if somebody is heading the ball towards somebody's kicked the ball towards the goal, and you shove your head in at the way, and as a result of that, the goalie doesn't make the save he was going to make. That's an auto goal. Where it is said to you is, you can't determine the actions of the other party. In other words, if Mbappe is going to kick the ball towards the goal, he will kick the ball towards the goal, and other than you defending, you're not really one stopper. What you have to try to do is to understand the play around you so you not shove your head in at the way and stop the goalie from scoring a goal. There is no reason when somebody is throwing fuel on the fire for you to put more firewood in there.
That's an intellectual, that's a very difficult intellectual exercise because...
No, it's not intellectual, not real, my boy.
The average person who's already against, who was probably thinking, okay, let me give this thing a fair shot. All they hear is a soundbite that if you are considering to vote no, you are crazy. That's all they heard.
And they're going the other way against that. Yeah.
And to fix that, it will take time.
I hear you. And I always say this. The person who tells a story first, tell it best. But if you are fighting to react to a situation or an unfortunate, please, this is the man who introduced artificial boundaries into the conversation. And for years afterwards, nobody could hear anything except artificial boundaries. Now the same person has said, and unfortunately, he's a person of extremely high rank and caliber, right? The face of the campaign, so to speak.
This is the goalkeeper?
This is the goalkeeper. And the goalkeeper now, I tell you, here what? If you think that, you know, tending the goal here and not allowing any goals is correct, well then you crazy. I know my people, you know, me that one and then two, and I got the same bad ways. If you tell me I crazy, I might just get perverse and act the other way, and maybe I act crazy for you then. You want to see crazy? Hold ya. I understand that.
Can I ask one more question?
And so no, yes, 9 months out. Is it 9 months? It's like 6 and 3. Yeah. 7, 8 months out. Yeah. 8 months out, you now have to climb that hill to displace that crazy.
So and that will be the challenge of the education campaign. I think
precisely
it is. If we dwell on what the foreign minister says, and in fact, even other cabinet ministers, as we saw the deputy prime minister say, says he would have said it differently, acknowledging that it was not the right thing to say.
The deputy prime minister is a very astute gentleman. He understands messaging perhaps a whole lot better than his colleague does. Perhaps because he has certain aspirations. Good for him. Yeah. He gets it. Yeah. He gets it. Look, you will say I'm completely biased. You will have every right to say so. I can think of few people who are better at these explanations than Assad. really. And anybody who wants to call him an intellectual hasn't seen him connect with people. He connects with people. It talks to people in a language where they understand. And I think it is exceedingly unfortunate that he is not the face of this. Love Alexis Rosado. I think he's extremely effective. I think he's a good diplomat, but he is our ambassador to Guatemala. And he doesn't connect with people in the same way.
In all fairness, we don't know what the education campaign will look like.
We don't know how we spend money on it.
And it's happening, obviously, in pockets somewhere.
Supposedly it's happening.
Can I ask my final silly question, which is...
No question is silly.
My final, in terms of the foreign minister.
Yes.
We have the time frame, we have these problems.
Yes.
His cabinet colleagues are saying, we know practically and technically what it will take to get us back to a certain area. Has he outstayed his welcome? Very simple.
You better ask the Prime Minister that. I dare not. Here's the thing. There's been loud complaining for a long time about the Foreign Minister's carriage and conduct of our foreign affairs. As citizens, we have a right to say so. Rightly or wrongly, we're not the ones who make that call. The one who makes that call is the man at the top, the only person who has any say as to whether the foreign minister is the right person is the Prime Minister. Yeah. And let me just say this. He has now been the longest serving foreign minister Belize has ever had since independence. 10 years. So actually 10 years. So this is what we're talking about. You've had someone who has been a flashpoint for 10 years. The biggest challenge for me as a very temporary foreign minister, I was full foreign minister but only for 7 months. The biggest challenge for me was to curb my own natural instinct to give my opinionated opinion. That is not my business as foreign minister. My business is to be a messenger for my government. And make I tell you, that discipline was difficult, but I learned it. Thank goodness I had 7 years as ambassador to master that discipline. Because you are not your own messenger. When you speak, the world hears you speaking on behalf of your government. So you learn not to make throwaway remarks that will haunt you and your country afterwards. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
No, for me, I think going back to the issue of the referendum, we want to educate people, and it's the most important.
Yes, it is.
It is our most important goal.
Well, it's our existential crisis, no, this issue.
And this is a difficult decision for people to make. One, because there's just the emotional instinct first. And nobody should ever condemn that. Yeah.
How you feel about it, how you feel about it. Yeah. That's not wrong.
And secondly, I think what we keep on hearing from those who have been a part of the process, it's almost that one of the things I keep on thinking to myself is, will opportunity knock twice? Will we be able to get the opportunity to take this to the court to finally put an end to this issue at another date? Because we hear from people like Assad and many others how many times we've been trying to get to this point to get Guatemala to say yes, to go to court and resolve this issue.
And not just yes on a basis that is not ex aequo et bono. In other words, which means a fancy Latin phrase for saying we're not going with notions of fairness, we're going strictly upon the law, right? So that nowhere fair or where you think you should have get. Yeah. It's strictly on the law. Because they had agreed to go earlier, in the 40s, but they wanted to go ex aequo et bono. In other words, they wanted to go on notions on what is fair to them and where they should have get because this and that and the other, right? What's fair? What's just? What's equitable? And those are all terms of art. They have a special meaning. All of them mean we're not going strictly on the law. And we have steadfastly refused to go under any condition other than we go strictly on the law. We finally got them to say that's what they would do. They would go. So it's unique. I will never say that it will never happen again. I'm not one of those people. I take a long arc of history it can come again, but if we don't take this chance, I think it would be another generation, another, say, 20 years before we got the chance again.
But what...
And in the meantime, things are happening on the ground because nothing stays still.
Yeah.
I go back to that 1948 map of Palestine, okay? And I look at it now. Everywhere and anywhere along the way, there were sign markers and opportunities for there to come to a one-state solution, a two-state solution. For whatever reason, it was not done. And Palestine today does not look like it did in 1948. That is just a fact. Right?
Now we are, it's interesting because I think within the next couple of, we have a couple more months before people get distracted by Christmas. And then
wait.
September 1st?
No, man.
Wait, September.
You rang too. Back to school first.
Yeah.
Back to school.
Yeah.
September, Columbus Day, Garifuna Settlement Day, Christmas,
Maga season.
Valentine.
Yeah.
Maga season first.
Maga season first, then Valentine's, as we say. Right? Wait. And then Easter.
The point is,
we are a nation with a certain amount of national ADD.
But my question is...
Things hard, so we have to find a way for distract ourselves. Let's go there.
Many different interpretations. But do you feel that we have sufficient time to have the
Yes, we do, but only, yes, we do.
But I want to say from both sides, because
but only if we do the right thing and we have the right people. What do I mean by that? You do have to give the no proponents a fair opportunity to put their case to the people. Even if you don't give them equal time, you have to give them a fair opportunity. 1. Right? 2. You have to have the right people directing.
Or no with emotion, or no
whatever, however they want to say no, Marlene, because I think we can't discount the emotion. Okay? I personally think that Derek Aikman is hysterical, but I think he has a right to be heard. Boom. I don't think his thing is fact-based, but he has a right.
We have experience with this. We saw with the cannabis issue, where those who were opposed were given a voice as much as those who were pro.
And so, therefore, this is even more so because it is such a critical national conversation that it would be downright undemocratic to deny a Derek Aikman, a Will Mejia their say. They have a right to their say, and they should be afforded a fair opportunity to put it before the Belizean people. And I trust the Belizean people for pick sense out of nonsense. I trust them to check their change. Even though the noise of the market is around them, I trust Belizeans to do so. But they should not be asked to do so without a full and fair opportunity to prior informed consent.
All right.
Period.
We got to wrap up this segment. We're completely out of time. Thank you so much for coming in. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
We're going to go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, it's for the Garifuna Collective. So stay tuned.